Have you always been into cameras and stuff?
Yeah. So I was always the kid with the cameras, yearbook committee,
Really?
weddings, all that stuff. Yeah, it was never like intentional. It was always just kind of like vlogging before vlogging really became a thing, where I would never put it together. You know what I mean? I never really understood editing until I probably like 8 years ago. But I would like to film stuff just to go back and watch it and smile because I kind of got it from my dad. My interest in filming things were really to study to start. It wasn't really about the cinematics. It wasn't really about the putting together a art piece. It was more so to watch my movements, watch other people's movements, and learn from people because I'm the youngest of 9. So by the time my parents got to me, they were tired of raising kids. So the only way I was able to learn was to watch people that were older than me. And the best way I would do it sounds kind of crazy, was watch film. I would watch like how my brother Muhammad conducted himself, who is probably the hardest working person I've still.
And when you say watch film, are you saying watching film as in watching film in real life? Like watching your older siblings?
Yeah,
okay.
like I'll watch like a wedding film, and someone asks a question on the film, and I'll watch their face, how they react to it, or how they move, or how they handle a tight situation. Something that detailed, and that kind of springboarded me into just like my insanity about how I watch film now in my NFL career. But yeah, it really started with my dad. So I've always kind of had a camera around me because of my father.
Yeah. So it's so funny that you started with that, because one thing I've always appreciated about you since knowing you, so even like I know we first started off as enemies, just being on different teams, but even though we were on that energy, but one thing that I loved about watching you is your vulnerability and authenticity and your willingness to share who you are fully. And it's funny because I was talking to Alex before the podcast. I was like, it's weird for me to see Ameer in football gear because I don't even see you as a football player. But I would believe that most people see you as a football player first because that's what their interests are.
Of course.
And I've heard you talk about on Instagram how I knew that there were 9 siblings. I didn't know where you fell. I knew you were towards the younger siblings, but I didn't know you were the baby.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm the oldest in my family. And I was someone who did not have anybody to look up to. And everything that I did in my life was always making the mistake, learning during the mistake, and then kind of finding the answers for myself. And what's been fascinating about watching you share who you are in your career outside of football is your ability to articulate your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, what you're genuinely going through. You share things about being able to cry and how crying feels good. And it's just fascinating to me. And to hear you talk about where the seed was planted was your dad and watching film and how you took that skill that was literally watching a screen into your real life is phenomenal, bro. And I want you to kind of dive into how that has shaped who you are, having older siblings, being the baby. Like if I had these disadvantages of being the oldest, right? What would you say your disadvantages were being the baby, if there are any at all?
Yeah, I would say off the bat, my biggest disadvantage is I think every youngest child would say they're a little impulsive. I'm a little impulsive. Sometimes I shoot first, act later. And I think that's just because I've always had so many siblings. I have 6 sisters. And you know how nurturing, women are. So I always had a safety net. So if I were to make a mistake, if I were to bump my head or start in the wrong direction, someone can steer me back, pretty quickly. And I never really missed a beat. And obviously it gets to a point where you become an individual and an adult. And I can be a little impulsive sometimes where like my creative intuition can be louder than my actual logical, base sometimes. But I think that's just the beauty of the art of being a human. I think being a human is an art. Someone that I really also learned a lot about from my father was Bruce Lee. My father was a prolific speaker. He was the leader of our mosque, my church growing up. And he would always give like sermons about movies a lot, and he broke down one movie that Bruce Lee was in, but one movie that really sticks out to me was The Matrix that he broke down. And when you talk about planting those seeds of like being able to articulate, my emotions and how I'm feeling in real time, a lot of that was really bred from, really watching my dad speak in front of large groups of people vulnerably about the things that he's been through in his life and also bringing people along to the path that where he ended up, going as a leader of his church, a leader of his community. So, yeah, I think going back to your question though, probably the biggest disadvantage is being a little impulsive, and not always thinking full, spectrum of how this may play out. But to me, that's exciting. To me, that's exciting sometimes to make the mistakes because I think you don't really know anything until you experience the other polar opposite a lot of times. And I push myself to those thresholds, not only physically, but also emotionally and spiritually, where, I've over the years found myself in the acting space a lot more. And that is probably one of the most vulnerable things I've ever experienced, I thought that some of the opportunities I had to lead a football team in college and in the NFL so far were going to, really break my shell and open me up to a space that I wouldn't ever expect. But, stepping into the acting realm is even more different because everyone there is authentically themselves all the time. And they're so open that their energetic flow is so abundant. Like they're able to really jump into different bags or different pockets of, I'm feeling sad now, or I need to embody this excited person. And it's so real and it's so raw that, I've been on set sometimes, like last summer, I was on set of my first movie that I filmed. And it was a scene that was so emotionally, riveting that I wasn't even in. I was just watching the scene where we had to take a break just because even though we were embodying a fictional character, they really allowed themselves to fully open up and be there and be fully present in that, which was so beautiful. I was like, wow, that is the type of vulnerability that I want to be able to effortlessly, exhibit at any moment. So, yeah.
So when you talk about the ability to feel is what you're saying, right? And finding that outside of a locker room, what has that been like for you when football is like, it's all that we did and we only could juggle a few emotions, which was aggression, fear, which we didn't really know we were dealing with. I would say, I would put those at the top, but sadness, loneliness, all these other things were trickling at the bottom, but we were expressing them through aggression and fear.
Yeah.
So what has it been like for you as a man who is still playing football and is also dabbling in other things like acting and feeling your emotions, and that being put out there in the forefront in acting? What has that been like for you to actually put yourself in the emotion and express it rather than suppressing it how we do as a man?
It's been really scary, yeah, because like you said, football is interesting. It's all the platform and ingredients to be vulnerable because it's so many people from different walks of life in one common space trying to achieve one common goal. But there is that shell, right? Like the platform and the foundation is there for ultimate vulnerability and just like real growth to happen daily because there's so many different perspectives mixing. But as you said, we kind of shelter that and it only really comes out in toughness, assertiveness, and more aggression. But it's been tough because for me, diving more into the arts has felt like a contradiction when I come back into the football space.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is, very objective. A touchdown is a touchdown.
Yeah.
Yard statistics are statistics. When you go into more of the art space, it's about how you're perceived by whomever at any given time. If I watch a film, you may not receive the same thing that, if I watch it, then you watch it, right? And for me, that level of freedom of perspective has really opened me up at times where I go through this, like my brother always jokes where like, he's like, your energy waves through the year where you're in the season and you're locked in, you're assertive Ameer. And then off season comes, I kind of get more into the water side of myself, which is more healing, nurturing. I'm around my nephews and my nieces a lot more. I'm softer. I'm writing more. I'm, trying to learn different crafts and just allowing myself to be a lot more present in the spaces that I am, as opposed to always having that North Star like it is in the season, right? You remember in football, it's like the objective of this week is this North Star, and that's what you're drilling into your mind all the time, which can feel a little cold and it can feel a little hollow, which it has its benefits as well. I think I've been able to dance with, integrating the structure of football in my life that's allowed me to, exist in both realms without going crazy.
Yeah.
But as I was saying, a lot of times when I go through that flow of the year where we get out of the off season, I'm in this period now where I'm starting to train more, I'm starting to ramp up, I start to get back to that fire side, that side that's can spark creativity and it can spark a lot of instant, joy. But as fire always goes out.
Yeah.
Water always finds its way around. My brother Kareem used to always say that, love is blue. And he's not saying love is sad. He's saying love is like water. It always seeps and finds its way around. And I've always felt that like that contrast just creates a lot of steam. Sometimes, like water and fire mix, it creates a lot of steam where like I don't really know where I fit in a lot of times in the space of football, sometimes in the locker room, which has been kind of tough because I can be misunderstood, a lot of times where I'm this expressive, I'm this vulnerable guy that likes to smile. I like to have deep conversations about your relationship. I like to have deep conversations about relationship with your parents, things that a lot of guys will put the wall up like, hey, we're not doing that here.
So what does that do for you as a human being? Like you talked about being a human. I'm not talking about being a man or a woman. I'm talking about being just a human. You're talking about I'm not authentically, well, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not authentically being myself because it's not allowed and it's not being received. So I'm going to be this fiery person because that's what the environment requires. What does that do to you as a human, as somebody who knows who you really are, I guess I would say, because part of you, who you really are, is who you are in the locker room as well. But we evolve as beings, right? And that's why I said I loved watching you because you show your evolution and you show just the authentic side of who you genuinely are.
Yeah. Well, I'll correct you just slightly.
Okay.
It's not that I'm not my authentic self in the locker room. I just have to understand who I'm dealing with a lot of times in the moment, and especially as I've gotten older, they call me OG now, I've been in the league going on 11 years now. So like, I'm a little long in the tooth, especially in the running back position. So a lot of times when I'm talking to the young guys, I have to apply a lot of patience because I don't want to be the old guy that's just beating them over the head with a book saying, read this, or, understand life this way. So I think it's different fixings for different people a lot of times where there is a bit of a code switching, but it isn't necessarily putting my happiness or my authentic self to the side. It's more so being able to understand and kind of like astro project in that moment and to see their perspective of like everyone is where they are because that's where they're supposed to be in their chapter. I see it all the time. A lot of guys come in the league and they're like, yeah, can't tell me nothing. Like I'm on a fire rampage. And then they get to like year 4, 5, 6. They start to slow down. They start to see the mortality, start to get a little more achy. They start to see, the empathetic sides of life a little bit more. And their perspectives on things start to change. The conversation starts to change. I've seen over the last 3 years of me just being with the Raiders. And for me, being the youngest in my family, I think gave me a great perspective because I'm the youngest of 9 and all of us are so different that I'm a lot of times the common ground. It's not a lot of beef in my family, but a lot of people can come to me and know like, oh, we can talk to Ameer, it's open. And I welcome that because intuitively I feel like I'm the filter of the family. I'm the cleanser. When emotional distress is going on or something, they can come to me. I can help them filter it because I'm open. And I will have any conversation, no matter what it is, and then they can go back into the world and feel healed. And I felt like that prepared me for my professional environment where I also play that role in the locker room where Ameer could be hanging out with the punters one day. You know how weird punters are. Punters are weird. Shout out to AJ Cole, by the way. New contract with the Raiders. Congrats, brother. But the kickers are different people. And then the O-linemen are different people because they're everyday blue collar guys. They don't get the love. They don't get the respect, but they're the ones that keep the team together. But they're like regular guys. They're driving Toyota Camrys and, chilling. Then you got the DBs and receivers that are a little bit more flashy, right? You're an outlier. You're definitely an outlier. We're going to talk about that.
You wouldn't even think I was a DB.
What? You do not have DB energy.
No,
you do not, which is insane. But, but so for me, I've experienced all those different realms before. The realm of me being super fiery. Like when I first got in the league, I was flashy. I was more fiery, you know? And then when I realized that wasn't sustainable, as I, mentioned earlier, fire burns out. And eventually it becomes like a parasitic thing where you're reaching for the next thing all the time. You start to realize like, I need to water myself. I don't need to light this place on fire. I need to water myself so I can grow more, more vertically integrated and more grassroots, And, so every different pocket of the team presents a different, personality. And I feel like from my family of 9, I've been well groomed to kind of be that filter. So I'm able to still be my authentically self, but meet people where they are to make them feel welcome, but still drop the nuggets here and there to let them know that this is an authentic connection. This isn't just me superficially, trying to make small talk or get through the day.
Put on a show. Right? Yeah.
And I think that's something that through my career, most people would say with their connection or exchanges with me that they felt.
When you talk about being the filter of your family, what is that like for you? I hear, I'll speak about my family a little bit. I'm the filter of my family too, but I'm the oldest. And being the oldest, I'm learning as I go. And I'm also realizing a lot as I'm going. And I'm like, oh, damn, that's what it is. I got to work on it now. And then when I get the answers, I'm going to give my family the answers.
Yeah.
And for me, it's been really difficult because I have to go find these resources and these tools by myself. Nobody's giving them to me.
Yeah.
I have nobody to look up to. And people are still coming to me as like the filter or the therapist because I can at bare minimum, I can at least articulate how I'm feeling.
Right.
Now, when it comes to like giving you the right advice, all I can do is speak from experience. I don't know if I can tell you the right thing to do. You know what I'm saying? So that's my experience in my family. What is it like for you to be the filter? And I'm asking this because I know a lot of people who are that for their family and it's just too much because they have life going on themselves.
Yeah. It's also difficult for me. I'm learning as I go as well because it's interesting we have that different perspective of you being the oldest, me being the youngest. I think naturally people probably come to you a lot for like advice, in general. And it's a little different for me. Like it's more so I'm the therapist that they're not looking for unsolicited advice from, and they know they won't get that from me. They'll get like a genuine listening ear. Someone who will ask first, like, do you want advice? And I think that's important because all of my family members are extremely exceptional, and I'm really not saying that I have, journalists for NBC, attorneys, investment consultants, pharmacists. I have like really high achieving people in my family. So they're like very hard on themselves a lot of times and they work themselves too much, in my opinion.
Where does that come from?
9
siblings doing really well. Black family.
Yeah, yes. From Alabama. I think, well, for starters, I think it comes from my parents. They did a good job, just their decorum and how they raised us in a pretty rough neighborhood growing up was they kept us focused on our power a lot. They spoke life into us a lot of what we could be and what we could achieve if we stayed consistent and steadfast. And they actually were that themselves. It wasn't just lip service where they were telling us to be something that we didn't see every day. My mom and dad worked very hard to provide for us in a very tough situation. So they pretty much made lemonade out of lemons for sure. So seeing that, I think a lot of us, there's like a little bit of a competition thing because, we all know that we have our own individual superpowers. Some people being really smart, some people having unbelievable ingenuity to create something out of nothing. Some people having physical gifts. My brother Kareem has musical gifts. He's a sound engineer, so we all have our little things and we all kind of like, I think subconsciously have like a little light competition of like pushing each other of just like, I'm steady, improving in my craft. But I do think we all can get lost in it, myself included, where we get too focused on these earthly passions, these things that stay here when you pass away. That's something I've really been training myself to let go of is letting go of earthly passions, things like money, things like tangible things that you can buy here, that when your body and your soul passes on to the next realm, it stays here stays here on earth. And I think we can kind of get lost in that just a little bit. But I think a lot of it foundationally comes from the parents, I would say, just being people who are hard workers. Like my father and my mom, my dad will be, 2025? My dad will be 81 this year, be 81. My mom will be 75, 74, 75. And they lived through some crazy times.
Yeah.
Like my dad was born in 1944. He was born at the end of World War II. So he lived through, he fought in the Vietnam War. He lived through the civil rights. He lived through all these different eras. And just him being the walking thesaurus that he is, there's no reason that we should ever feel like our environments are too tough to get out of. And I think that's why we are who we are. But I think on the flip side, the negative side of that is we're very closed off people. We are sometimes where when we're going through something, we'll double down and shelter it and not express it and try to pull ourselves out of it because we kind of naturally all think like every success and failure is yours type of mentality. And I think that's where me being a ninth child, the number of completion, being that person of like, I'm going to break those chains. I'm going to be able to ask for help. I'm going to be able to open the floor to let you know like, hey, I'm stressed out because I got this going on. My relationship's not, not where I want it to be, and not feel like I'm failing. Because I think that's where the identifying factor lies for a lot of us is if we admit something, that's admitting a failure. So, yeah.
You said your dad he ran a mosque?
Yeah, so my dad was an imam. So an imam is pretty much like the pastor of a church, but he would just be the pastor of the mosque. So
I'm really illiterate when it comes to like mosque and stuff.
Yeah.
So explain to me what.
So a mosque is just like the church. It's just the terminology that's used in the Islamic faith.
Okay.
For a church.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was pretty much like the pastor of the church.
Okay.
Where every Friday, which is our Jummah service, is when we do Friday. Then we have a Sunday service as well. My dad would give different sermons, and I would see him just like break down either books that he read or just films that he watched that were symbolic to where we were spiritually as a nation or as a community or whatever goal that he felt like he needed to reach, those in the crowd. And I wanted to kind of comment on what you were saying about, me not speaking about my NFL career like maybe it will be anticipated. I've always seen myself, well, maybe not always, but for the most part, I've seen myself as an athlete by trade, an artist by spirit.
Always?
Maybe not always. That's what I'm saying. Maybe not always, but like.
When I mean always, I'm talking about internally. Like you felt that there was something else besides you being an athlete. Not consciously. Okay.
I did. Even when I was a kid, I've always felt like I knew I had a common denominator. And I didn't know, I couldn't really articulate it until probably about 10 years ago, really, when I first got in NFL. But I've always had the common denominator of wanting to educate. And education can look a lot of different ways. And I think I took the form of film. You can learn a lot from film. It's a lot of, in good film, it's a lot of good context that you can learn from a historical sense or just a analytical, sense. And I've always felt like that was my common denominator or my sword of choice in my art form of if I'm playing football, I also want to be someone that people can learn from. I've always looked at my game and felt like no one else runs like me. I have a more unorthodox, style of running. So in that, I know whoever likes that style will learn from it and want to maybe apply to it. It still blows my mind a lot of times when I go somewhere and someone recognizes me in public and they're like, man, I used to watch you when you had this run. And they're learning, they're taking from it. It's influencing them. So that always connected my love for the game of football is the reach you can have by impacting someone else's, mind for the next generation. One of my favorite, I guess I'll call him artists as well, is Tupac Shakur. He was somebody that by trade was a hip hop artist, but he was truly spiritually moved by art.
He
was unbelievable actor, unbelievable speaker. A lot of people forget that he died at 25.
Yeah.
All the quotables that he has. And he has a famous quote that says, I may not change the world, but I may spark the brain that does. And I've always kind of felt like that's what really inspires me a lot more. And that's kind of what I mean by, athlete by trade, because that's what I'm most recognizable by. You Google me, it's going to come up with football. But by spirit, I'm moved more so by the art of being a human and going through the ebbs and flows of life and allowing yourself to pretty much have the ego death, come back, what I mean, and survive and do it all over again. So.
What would you tell to a young athlete who identifies himself by the sport that they play because they feel like they have to? How can they find themselves when they essentially were told what their identity was by other people?
I'll ask a few questions. Are you doing it because you see an objective at the end of the road first? I think that's a question a lot of us need to ask ourselves. Are we doing what we're doing because you think you can get something tangibly out of it? And if that's it, that's fine. It isn't, I'm not, reprimanding you if that is it, but just be clear on that message or be clear on that pursuit that I can define it that I'm playing this game for money or I'm playing this game for the status that I can get right now. And once you kind of define that, whether yes or no, I think it'll give you a pretty clear direction on who you really are or what really makes you who you are in this chapter, at least. And I think for a lot of the kids who are out there that feel like they have to be defined by football, sounds a lot like slavery to me, in my opinion, and I would never compare it, specifically to that, but it psychologically can be, because if you're doing something just because you feel like you have to do it to provide or to get yourself out of this space, you're probably making the decision out of fear as opposed to love. And those are two polarities that I think a lot of us make a lot of our decisions from. We either making a decision out of anxiety because we're afraid of what the future may bring, or we're making a decision out of fear because of something that happened in the past that leads to depression, in my opinion. And a lot of times, if you are in a place where you're doing something because of what it may bring to you and what it may bring instead of what it may bring out of you, I think that it's a thin line, but the beauty on one side or the other is drastic. When I kind of let go of the idea of just like, I'm doing this just for money or I'm doing this just for status, that's when the vulnerability really came out. That's when the ability to tap into the arts where I'm auditioning, I'm getting callbacks as an actor really allowed me to step into my true self and my true life and capabilities. Because I think a lot of times when you are, I kind of mentioned this earlier, when you're doing something to get something out of it, that's like being a parasite. And once you get that out of it, there's no end to that. It's going to be the next thing. It's going to be the next thing. And then you're burning the rope at both ends until it meets at one point where you got nothing left in you because you weren't able to pour back inside of yourself because it was never coming out of you. You were feeding off of this. You were feeding off of this moment. You were feeding off of this dollar, right? So, my advice for those kids would to be ask themselves, am I doing this just to get something out of it? Or am I doing it so it can bring something out of me?
And I think that's a really, really good question. It's one that, it's not an easy answer.
It's not.
Because I think that, let's say, for example, kids like, I'm doing this. The typical like hood story, right? I'm doing this to like get my mom out the hood and get my mom to stop working, et cetera, et cetera. So like doing it for money, I'm doing it for a good reason. But I think the trap is, if you don't come from money when you get money, most of the time you don't know how to manage money and you don't really know how you're going to change once you get money.
Right.
So I just think that once you identify what it is that you're doing it for, I think accepting that and just riding the wave and just see what happens.
Yeah.
Because I think the only way to really get the answer as to if this is truly why you're doing it is to actually go for it and just see what happens. And one of my biggest fears has always been, I don't want to climb the wrong ladder to get to the top and realize like, damn, I don't even want to be up here. Because that's kind of what my experience was with football was my goal was just to get drafted. Like for me, I'm a lot like you. I didn't have the resources of performing arts growing up. Like football is just what we did. And I just happened to be good at it. And I enjoyed the leadership, and I enjoyed the companionship, and I enjoyed competition. And just through the years, every time I would play at every level, it's like, oh, I can do that. Oh, sure, I'll do it. And so Pop Warner, get to high school. I started playing at high school. I know that I'm pretty good, but I don't know anything about college, bro. I don't know the difference between D1, D2. I don't know nothing. I don't know Pac-10, Big Ten. I don't know nothing. I just like playing. And the first school that called me was Northwestern State, Oklahoma. It was an NAIA school, and I was geeked. I'm like, this is dope.
Northwestern State, Oklahoma
Northwestern State, Oklahoma State. Yeah, they probably had the tech at the end. It was an NAIA school, and I was super excited about that. And next thing you know, Boise State calls, U of A calls. I'm like, oh, damn, like, I guess I can play in these levels that people say are a big deal. And then I get into college, I become a starter, and next thing you know, the junior day comes where the scouts come and they take your measurements and you do the Wonderlic test. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I scored really high on the Wonderlic test. Oh, I guess I could probably do the NFL thing. And I work at it and I do it. I'm climbing this ladder, right? And then I'm like, oh, well, only 0.1% of players get drafted. Oh, damn, I want to do that because that just seems like really challenging and it seems like nobody can do it. I want to do it. I do it. I get to the league and I get drafted to the Dolphins. And then I'm like, oh, this is about to be about teamwork and camaraderie and brotherly love and all this stuff. And I'm like, yo, this is not what this is. In Miami, like I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do anything.
Not the environment for
I got a serious girlfriend.
Right.
I'm not frivolous at all. Yeah, I'm not outside. So I'm like, every time we go in the locker room and, these guys are coming from Tootsies. To practice, nobody's really talking to each other. You realize like the family men are over here, but they got their money. The rookies over here doing their thing. And I'm just like, this is not my environment. I don't even want to be here no more. I didn't want to play football no more. I was like, I don't want to do this. But my identity was tied into the actual game. That's why I was fascinated by what you were saying about seeing that earlier rookie year, like being fiery and be like, no, I actually don't want to do this, but I still can attach myself to this being work.
Right.
And I'm curious about that. Like, how did you detach yourself and not fall away from wanting to love the game? And I would say somewhat even work hard. Because for me, it's like, once I realized I didn't want to do it, bro, I didn't want to go to practice. I didn't want to lift. I was like, bro, I don't go about this, bro.
Man, that's a good question because that epiphany really happened for me like my second year. So I had a great rookie year. Going to my second year, tear my Liz Frank. I'm out for the season, right? So it was my first time. What? My Liz Frank. It's a ligament in your foot. It's pretty much like the ACL of your foot. Okay. It runs between your big toe and your second toe.
Okay.
It keeps you pliable.
Okay.
So I tear my Liz Frank, had to have surgery. I'm out for the season. And I'm just like a potato. I had never been hurt in my entire career, other than the game before we played Minnesota.
Oh, really?
My senior year, I kind of sprained my MCL against Purdue.
You didn't play?
I played that game, but I had a big old knee brace on.
I do remember
I had a big old knee brace on, man. I felt so whack, man.
I kind of balled that game.
You did. You ran me down. You ran me down. He ran me down. I broke out.
Yeah, I do remember
I had that gear. It was a knee brace, y'all. It was a knee brace. It was definitely a knee brace.
I do remember. It's so funny.
No, you put in work.
I was not gonna say this in the podcast. I told Alex this the other day. That same game, bro, it was me and you on like the 3-yard line. You rocked me.
I ran you over?
Oh, God.
Oh, I think I do remember that.
Oh, God, you rocked it. This is the cool part about it. This is the cool part about it, dog. I got up, and I didn't even recognize I said this until my teammates said it. I got up, and I was like, whoa. Bro, I think you can cuss me, dog.
Bro,
I think you can cuss me,
I remember that.
Bro.
I do remember that. That was a hard-hitting game.
Bro,
that was a hard-hitting.
Oh, yeah, bro.
I say this all the time, and people be like, what? And we're going to get back to what we're saying. But college has hurt way more than the league, bro. I don't know why.
Yeah, I think it's the Big Ten too, though.
I think it is. I think it is, man. Just big old players and just crash outs, man. In college, everyone just did not care about their bodies. NFL, you kind of make some business decisions. Look,
100%.
I'm on a contract year. I can't be out here doing that.
And like obviously the rules and stuff protect the players.
Yeah, it's just a lot different now. A lot different. But back to your question, I would say in my second year, I really had to dig deep during that time of rehab to figure out who I was and why I was playing this game. Because I was on IR, and I won't say any names. I was on IR with some other people who were on IR, and the way they chose to treat their time off was in a whole different, way of like you said, the Tootsie's route, going out, partying. Now you got free time. You're getting paid for pretty much work leave, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, I had to figure out like, am I just doing this for the money? Or am I doing this because this makes me feel alive? This makes me feel connected to my body. Like for me, I've always been a pretty holistic person. When I approach anything. If it don't move my spirit, I can't listen to it. If it don't move my spirit, I can't eat it. You know what I mean? That's just kind of how I go. And that's full encompassing. That's the body, mind, spirit, all that stuff. And I got to a point during that rehab where I was just like, hanging around with some of those guys that weren't focused on really rehabilitating and getting themselves back to take their career back off. I had to ask myself, like, if I'm just here collecting a check, I feel like a scammer. I feel like a liar. I feel like a cheat, So for me, that's when it started to become a lot more clear for me of just like, I don't do this just because I can get money from it. I do this because it actually makes me feel holistically bounded in that moment where like even today, when I work out, a lot of people's like, oh, I see you training for the off season. I get a little annoyed when I hear that. I'm like, no, I train for life.
You do not train
I train for life.
Yeah, bro.
You know what I mean? Like
you're training fashion, bro. It's like nobody's training fashion.
Yeah, no one's doing that. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot different. But, I would definitely say that's how I was able to separate where like, I can meet you where you are, but I'm always going to be myself. And I think that's what's really sustained me through the league was I can be myself. We can be talking. Hey, we about to go to the club. Everyone else going to the club. All right, peace. I'm going. And I'm not uncomfortable. I'm not like, oh man, what they going to think about me? And in fact, I like to look just like I was watching film when I was a kid. I like to look at their faces when I say that. When it just to see just that quick visceral reaction of like, oh, now I kind of feel bad about myself. I feel like I'm kind of, not making the most of myself, my opportunity, because outliers are the ones people remember. It isn't the people who did what everyone else was doing. And I'll definitely say that second year when I was around some people who were also on IR, and I just cut off those relationships where I just doubled down. I moved back down to Texas. I was living in McKinney, Texas at the time, trained at Michael Johnson Performance, got on my rehab crazy, came back that third year, and hey, we're still playing now, and, truth be told, some of those guys actually didn't play another year after that. Well, never like got on the field, So, and I think that was the difference. The difference was that decision of like, why am I doing this? Am I doing this? Oh, well, I can't play, so I'm just going to collect this check and have fun. No, I'm doing this because this is an opportunity that not a lot of people have.
Yeah.
I was just at Whole Foods and I was exiting, and like that little bottom, parking lot, that Whole Foods over there. It was a lady, she was walking with her mother. She was a small child and she had a walker. And anytime I see situations like that, I always just kind of like feel it deeply in my heart because I'm like, man, I think some of those, people or placed at certain times in your life, just to remind you, a reminder from God of just like, you're blessed. You can walk. I just walked up the steps, grabbed my juice, paid for it, no problem. 2-minute exchange. Her exchange going through Whole Foods is going to be a lot longer, And just little things like that, I'm like, nah, it's got to be a deeper purpose with everything I do because I could be that. You know what I mean? And then my whole, environment or my whole disposition is different. My life is different. So I don't say that to be like cheesy or anything like that.
I don't see it. I find it really inspiring, bro, because I think that like you do a really good job of analyzing what it is that who you are before you make a drastic change in your life. I don't know if you're in a relationship, but I imagine like being selective about being in a relationship is really, really important to you. Who you have kids with, I'm sure is really, really important to you. And that's really rare. I mean, it's rare where a man is thinking about who he wants to be with to match that person can match them energetically, spiritually, emotionally.
Right.
Like men aren't doing that. You know what I mean? Like like again, I think men aren't doing that and you do. So I don't see it as woo or weird. I see it as being mature.
Right. Yeah.
That's actually what it is.
Yeah.
I think that you can fall in love and have kids and make decisions irrationally when you feel like you're being rational. And I think to be irrational is to not pay attention to what it is that you really, really want, how you're really feeling or what you really need. So I don't see it as woo at all. I think you are living the full human experience which I think everybody wants to do. It's just really difficult to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that I think attributing it to your dad, I think you being the baby and like really being the baby and paying attention to your siblings who have done extremely well and set good examples is just a great thing for you to have and for you to live out.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast that you were on and you were talking about you being a gunner when you came here.
Yeah.
I want you to talk about that a little bit because I think that the idea of who you once were is no longer who that is. And that's really difficult for people to understand. So kind of break that transition and story down to me and what you learned in that.
Yeah, man. I'll go back to Nebraska days. I mean, I'm the all-time leading yard leader at Nebraska. Got into the league, second round pick, successful early, got injured, coaching changes. You know how that kind of, changes your career. Coaches changes. They came in, was like, we want a bigger back. They went in and got LeGarrette Blount, another guy named Kerryon Johnson, and they moved on from it. They sent me to Minnesota.
This is when Patricia was there, right?
Patricia. Matt Patricia was there. Sent me to Minnesota. And I come into a situation with a loaded backfield. Dalvin Cook was young. Latavius Murray was still in his prime. We had some other backs there as well.
Listen, damn.
I'm so mad. Our Minnesota teams underachieved like crazy, man. I'm supposed to have at least 2 Super Bowls. Like, for real, I really am, man.
Don't get him started. Alex is a huge Vikings fan,
dude,
bro.
Listen, our defenses were so unbelievable at that time. Like a prime Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Everson Griffin, Daniil Hunter, Tom Johnson, Linval Joseph, Harrison Smith, Trey Waynes, Xavier Rose, Andrew Bro, I'm telling you right now, I'm so mad that we always shit the bed when we got to the playoffs. And I honestly just don't even know where to start of how it happened. But I'm supposed to have 2 Super Bowls. I'm supposed to be super content with my career right now. Yeah. But when I got to Minnesota, like I said, it was a loaded backfield. And immediately, because of Dalvin and Latavius, I was thrown into the third down back row. So that was the first real change of like my whole understanding of like who I am in this new chapter.
Player, right?
As a player, because, I got the ball in Nebraska about 20 times a game, 25 times a game. And then when I was in Detroit too, not that many times. We were more of a passing team. But still, I was the focal point in that backfield, right? So when I get to Minnesota, I'm no longer just the focal point. I come in on third downs, pass protect, do my thing or whatever. But in the league, each position comes with like an assumed role, right? If you're the number 1 back, you ain't gonna play no special teams. But if you're the number 2 or number 3,
it's there.
You got to, because you can only put 46 guys out on the field on a game day, 48, something like that. So they asked me because of my speed, they were like, hey, we need some help at gunner. I had never played gunner in my life. And before, to me, it was a stigma on that to go from starting running back to go play gunner was kind of like, the audacity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But even in that moment, I had already kind of like been in this immediate, in real-time, self-regulated space where I could regulate really fast, where I was already humbled, right? I got shipped out of Detroit, right? They didn't see my potential. They didn't see my worth long-term anymore past those 4 years I was there. So it was like, hey, we're cool, moving on. Ego death. So for me, I had to humble myself of like, all right, maybe I'm not who I think I am right now. I need to get back on that horse and prove to myself that I am. So immediately, when they asked me to play gunner, I was like, man, this is crazy. But I was like, this is another opportunity. I really, and I wear this phrase out a lot, but I really believe that there is an opportunity in every obstacle that you face. It's about, in that real time, can you self-regulate and see it? And that's where that rational ability, you were talking about earlier, kind of like gets lost. Because people can't self-regulate in the moment, calm their nervous system, and see like, wait, what I see as an obstacle is actually that brink of greatness is right there. Anything great always is preceded by something difficult every time.
That's facts.
So I was like, in those moments, I've been able to do a good job of like, okay, they want me to play gunner. What is this teaching me right now? Oh, I'm in the mud right now. I'm trying to get back to a respectable running back position in the league. I need to show that I'm a dog anytime that I'm on the field. So I'm still salty that I didn't make Pro Bowl that year because I was going crazy at gunner. I was going crazy. Every time I went out there at gunner, because this gunner, in my opinion, is like the hardest one-play position in the game of football because you're A lot of times getting blocked by
front line KOR.
That's a hot take.
Okay.
I will say yes now. Because it's different.
It's way different now.
When we first got in the league, absolutely not.
Okay.
Frontline kickoff is the most diabolical thing you could possibly do in the game of football. I don't even understand why and who created that, but that person has got to have some ties to like some torturous CIA. Like that's some Guantanamo Bay stuff there. But anyways, I feel like gunner is one of the hardest one-play series that you can go. You know, you got sometimes two guys blocking you. They can push you out of bounds. They can hold you up if they're close enough. And you're sprinting sometimes between 40 to 60 yards while the ball is in the air and you're trying to tackle the most elusive player on their field, right? And he got 50 yards side to side to work and make you miss. And I think that play comes down to nothing but grit and dog. So what allowed me to get some contracts later in my career was, Ameer, anytime he was at gunner, showed up making big hits, forcing fumbles, doing a lot of things. It's like a lot of people don't take pride in that type of work. Mm-hmm. But you look at like the Matthew Slaters, who had like a 16-year career. Yeah. Literally, he has one catch in his career. 16 years of just covering punts. Mm-hmm. Now, fortunately, I was still able to have a lot of offensive production alongside of that. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention how instrumental that was in keeping me in the league, keeping me valuable to these teams, you know, when it comes to free agency, because I was for probably 4 years a top 5 gunner in the league for sure. And for me, the bigger lesson was like, right now, God's trying to teach you a little bit of, you know, a little grit, a little dogness, because as I mentioned on that other podcast you were listening to, if football is the hardest thing you go through in life, you're not really living.
That's facts.
It's a lot more going on out here, man. Like I just told you about the young woman I just saw at Whole Foods. It's a lot tougher battles to face than your ego being hurt, because maybe in one space or one chapter in your life, you were the starting receiver or running back. And then in this chapter, you're asked to do the glue work, the teamwork work, the special teams work, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, but that's a fact. Man, you saying like it's football. If football is the hardest thing you're going through in your life, then I think there needs to be some evaluation.
Especially in the NFL. Like, bro, what?
And I think it just goes back to like how much we tie our identity to something that does not love us back. You know what I mean? It's really, really hard to come to a conclusion. Is you want to do things that love you back, and most of the time you can't get that from people or things. You got to do it within yourself, you know? And that's just like a really...
It's hard.
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard. Bro, I was on a walk this morning and I'm like, I do like this articulation practice to learn how to like articulate my thoughts for my kids and for my wife. And I'm walking, I'm like, bro, why is this shit so hard? Why is this so hard, dog? This is really difficult to be able to label an emotion, get words to articulate it, and not think that you're crazy for feeling this way. Yeah. It's hard. You know what I mean? Like I'm getting emotional thinking about it because I want my kids and my wife to love me back, and they do by default, as long as I'm not screwing it up. Right. And that's not even true, because you look at people who didn't have their fathers in their lives, right? And their father dies. They're sad that their father died because they love their father, right? And when I think about me trying to do what I can, articulate my emotions and my feelings for my kids and how difficult it is, it's really, I wouldn't even say it frustrates me. It makes me sad because how bad I want it for myself and for them, so we can have a communicative love for each other. Because instead of me snapping how I seen my parents snap on us as kids because they didn't have the tools, I don't want to do that. Now I have to rewire my brain to work to be able and get the words to express how I feel without using it in an aggressive, fearful, inability to say, hey, I'm actually hurt or sad, or I'm really tired, honey, and I don't want to be bothered right now, and that's okay. And be okay with them sitting with it. I don't want to be bothered. That's something that you have to actually sit with, because I am a human, and I want you to see dad being a human. You know what I'm saying? Like, so just, bro, it's fucking hard.
That's beautiful, man. But it's hard. Honestly, if I can, bro, like I am absolutely in love with who you are, and I'm absolutely in love with the content that you put out, but because it's so needed for someone that aspires to have a family, someone that wants to build a healthy relationship and dynamic and trust in the future family that I'll have. The gems that you drop that allow me to start working on that now are so, so priceless. Because I think, I'm sure when you started your family, you hadn't worked on any of this stuff yet.
No,
you know what I mean?
I got thrown into the fire.
Once again, I'm little bro again.
Okay.
I'm little bro again in this
Yeah,
situation where I'm like, all right, I get to watch Ced go through this and vulnerably put it out to the masses because that's what we need. I think so much of like our failed relationships or just miscommunication between relationships between parents and children come from that, not having that, not being able to allow them to see you as a human.
Yeah.
That is gold because, as the father, a lot of times societal constructs will make it believe that we have to be these strong pillars, which is something that me and my father's relationship, as much as he was a shining light for me, is still growing. He is the oldest in his family as well. And he is kind of closed off where I remember when I was at a funeral when we were younger, I was crying. It was his mother. And I was crying and I actually didn't get to know her as much as I knew my mom's mom, but I still was sad just because that relationship with the grandmother is special for a child, right? You get to do what you want a little bit, you got a little bit of freedom. And she was gone. I was crying for what I knew I was missing out on. And immediately it was like, you got to be strong for your sisters. You can't cry. And still to this day, sometimes I don't cry at funerals. And it's not like it's not there. It's still in me. And a lot of practices that I'm doing now to allow me to open up. So I'm reading a lot of stuff about acting right now. And a lot of the practices I do now to allow me to open up and access the trauma or access that stuff to purify myself. The practice is called purifying the self. That's what it's called. Where you tap into when you hug someone, for example, thinking about what it would feel like not having them to hug anymore, right? And also, in that same breath, connecting back to, but I'm hugging them now.
And they're here.
So they're here, right? So like being able to practice that in real time is a learned thing for me now because I've pushed it down so much from what I thought was a healthy reinforcement of manhood from my father of like, be the foundation, be the boat, let everyone else be the sails. They can blow around, you stay sturdy, and to see you actively putting it into content format, for one, that's actually like tangible, things that people can understand is, dude, I'm so in love with it, man. I am, because it's such good stuff, bro. It's good. It's good stuff.
Thank you, bro. That actually means a lot to me because I think, I've always been authentically myself. And I think, as a video is an art form and it's really difficult to take these really complicated thoughts and emotions and put them into 60 or 90 seconds is what people want now these days. It's really complicated. I want to end with this. Like my life kind of runs on two quotes. Everything works how it's supposed to, or take things one day at a time. You could choose both if you want. I want you to try to choose one. If you had to choose one to run with for your life, which one would you run with and why?
I would say everything happens how it's supposed to. But even in that thoughts, remain present. And remaining present will allow you to take one thing at a time. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg a little bit. Where for me, I think taking things one step at a time will naturally allow things to happen how they're supposed to, And by taking things one step at a time, still being free enough to release the expectation of what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to bring you, or what it's supposed to necessarily even feel like. But throwing yourself vulnerably in it one step at a time and just taking the lessons on the way and enjoying the journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful, bro.
Everything works out the way it's supposed to.